The best of all canoeing streams left in America today is the beautiful Buffalo, upon whose waters we will journey in this film.
2022, the 50th anniversary of the river, is an excellent opportunity to look back on what has been able to occur by setting aside this piece of public land in the last 50 years.
The Buffalo holds this weird magic.
The river it's just a magical place to be.
You're out there in the elements, you're out there in nature, you're out there in one of the greatest rivers in the world.
The natural beauty of it, the wildness of it.
God's gift to Arkansas and Arkansas's gift to America.
On a rainy day in April 1963, the Ozark Society assembles for its first outing.
Buffalo National River was made in 1972, March 1st.
The Ozark Society, which is the conservation organization that really made the Buffalo National River happen, was formed the same year that Walmart was. Justice William O. Douglas was paddled down the river by Harold and Margaret Hedges. Neil Compton and Sam Walton were on that trip. In fact, Neil was the one filming it, and Ken Smith's Buffalo River Country book came out in 1967, and the Ozark Society used that book as a weapon politically to show others what this river was like, and it was such a well-written book.
Within the Ozark region are almost limitless ranges of hills and mountains, forest-clad with deep valleys between. A perfect setting for hiking, horsebacking, and mountain climbing. But above all else, the Ozarks offer to young and old that most delightful of outdoor sports, canoeing. The best of all canoeing streams left in America today is the beautiful Buffalo, upon whose waters we will journey in this film, in company with Justice William O. Douglas, world-famous conservationist. Mr. Douglas had just arrived and is beset by newsmen.
What occurred in 1972 and the years leading up to that were a great example of civic engagement. The people in the area were having conversations. Did they want this river to become public land? For people to come and visit from all over the country to see the pristine beauty of this undammed river.
What it took to become America's first national river was its own piece of legislation. That act was introduced in 1966. 6 years later, that it actually became a bill that was passed by Congress and signed on March 1st, 100 years to the exact day that Yellowstone became a national park.
In today's modern world with all the electronics, I think that people need a place to unwind, and the Buffalo River is a perfect example of it. The natural beauty of it, the wildness of it. When you're floating the river, you can't even get a phone call. And I think that's a great experience, because it's an experience some people have never had.
The Buffalo is a very long and stretched out piece of public land. 135 miles of waterway here.
2 years ago, Joshua took me on a birthday picnic to the Buffalo, and we ended up going back through the Ozarks, and that's how I discovered fly fishing.
The Buffalo River here is preserved as a cool water fishery. It's preserved as a smallmouth bass fishery, so obviously if you would have had a dam here, part of it would have been flooded, and the part below the dam might have been a cold water fishery, or a tailwater, if you will. Not putting a dam on this preserves it as a native fish fishery.
In the 50s and the 60s, a lot of big dams were being made in the United States. Here in the Midwest, large dams were used for the creation of recreational lakes, to create electricity, to support local communities.
The Corps of Engineers were developing plans to put 2 different dams on the Buffalo River. Their goal was to put as many dams in Arkansas as they could on streams to produce hydroelectric power and a recreational component, although when you looked at their master plans, recreation was certainly a minuscule part of the plan.
After these adventures on the shoals, let us here give thought to the great dams that have been proposed for this beautiful whitewater stream. Over the last 25 years, they have arisen across the valley of every river in the Arkansas Ozarks except the Buffalo. Now, 100 miles of its lively waters are destined to become stagnant impoundments unless its true worth as a national recreation area is recognized by enough of us to save it from such a needless fate. All along the river, the verdant forest will fall like harvested grain under the blades of the great cutters.
When I was a little younger, thought the dam would be good. Of course, from our folks and stuff talking about the dam, a lot of it I think is thinking about cheap electricity. A lot of these people up and down to here still lost their property. My grandfather still lost his. So it's just, at that time, a lot of people just didn't understand. I'm sure there's a lot of misinformation about stuff.
There were people who were for those dams that thought another lake with more fishing and boat docks and that kind of stuff would be good for the recreation industry.
The original settlers around here that still have some hard feelings about the Park Service, talked to lots of them over the years, and I can understand if I lived here and I had property down on the river, they would make you move off. I can understand how that is, but to be honest, we're so much better that the Park Service is here because this would probably be so commercialized. You can go right now to the Spring River and see what you got there. People own property all along it, got posted signs all along it, and that's what this would have been if the Park Service didn't have it, in my opinion.
Having the lake, everybody think, well, it's really going to create a lot of jobs and stuff, and yeah, it would have, but you'd be sitting right here looking off this porch and you'd probably see a house on every ridge if it had been a lake. There'd been hotels and motels, and I don't know, it had just been kind of like Branson or something like that, and one Branson is enough.
The leader of the movement to dam the Buffalo has said, quote, "To leave the Buffalo River in its present state is utter folly. All rivers must eventually be dammed," unquote. He is asking that this forlorn vista be repeated once again along our last and loveliest mountain stream. But legislation to eliminate it has not been enacted.
This is definitely a true Ozarks experience because you don't have stream bank development. You go up and down some of the other more popular tailwaters in the state, and there are plenty of boat docks and resorts and cabins, and that's great. Those are fun rivers to fish in and of their own right. But to truly experience the Ozarks how it was before any of us were here, this is one of the few places left that you can still do it. This type of river is not an easy thing to find.
There are 12 campgrounds at Buffalo National River.
There are such diverse camping facilities along the Buffalo, from primitive camping at Steel Creek and Kyles and Ozark to a Class A campground at Buffalo Point and Tyler Bend.
There are developed campgrounds in the park, or maybe you want a more spur-of-the-moment, primitive experience. Floating on multiple day float trips leads to the opportunity to camp on a gravel bar. Camping on one of our trails for multiple days, maybe even weeks, can also lead to that experience.
You can carry all your equipment into the backcountry and camp near a popular feature and then in this amazing place all by yourself overnight. You appreciate it so much more when you did the work to get there.
It is up to every single one of us to keep it here, pristine, and to allow the experience that we have to be here for future generations. One way that we can do that is just keeping in mind the principles of leave no trace. Making sure that we are taking only pictures and leaving only footprints.
Leaving a tin can behind might not be that big a deal for one person, but you multiply that by the thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of people that will use the park, and you've really got a big mess on your hands.
My first overnight stay on Buffalo National River was after a very long day of floating. I was hot, I was tired, I was ready to stop for the night. We pulled the canoes over to a beautiful gravel bar, set up, had an excellent dinner, and just as we were sitting and exchanging stories around a fire, I happened to glance up at the sky, and it stunned me. Milky Way spread out above, colors, bright pinpoints of light I had never seen before.
The Buffalo National River is one of the world's most recent international dark sky parks. Looking up, there's very little light pollution. Therefore, the skies are darker and the stars are brighter. The river it's just a magical place to be. What I love to do is get on the river at daylight. The quality of that light early in the morning is just such a rare, beautiful thing. To be out there when the day begins, it's just everything is so fresh and new, and there's usually a lot less people on the river. There's usually a lot more wildlife active.
I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a prettier river to float. It stacks up there with some of the prettiest rivers in the whole country. It was the first national river, and one of the reasons that it was preserved was for its scenic integrity and beauty. It's a pretty unique river in that it's got limestone bluffs up and down almost the entire thing. You won't find many stretches along the river where you don't have some kind of limestone abutment within sight, or at least around the next bend. And that makes for just an incredible backdrop for whatever you're doing, whether it's fishing or paddling or camping.
One of the latest trips on the Buffalo River was a solo trip I did in preparation for the Missouri 340 race, a 340-mile race down the Missouri River. So I figured I need to get some miles in. What better place to do it than the Buffalo River, which is one of our favorite rivers. So I started off at Ponca and floated all the way down to Rush. That's 100 miles. Excellent trip. Like probably one of the best trips I've ever taken my entire life. For that trip, I packed pretty light, mostly dry food. Did have a fire at night. I did bring a tent, but other than that, that was really the only comforts. I mean, it was pretty much just from daylight to sundown, it was just paddle. You know, it was just training mode. But, you know, you're out there in the elements, you're out there in nature, you're out there in one of the greatest rivers in the world, and I'll do it again. I'll definitely be back to do a longer trip. This time, maybe bring John with me. Oh, I only stand up when I come up to people. Usually sitting down.
Underneath the water at Buffalo National River is a whole nother world.
Fishing on the Buffalo River can be some of the best I've ever seen.
The fishery of the Buffalo River is actually quite good. They put a regulation on it that you can only keep 2 fish and they have to be 14 inches in length.
Normally, you'll catch larger fish on the lower portion of the river.
The lower end of the river, of course, is a little bit bigger and wider, carries more water. You know, you've picked up quite a few tributaries this far down. It has a little bit more habitat for holding more fish and bigger fish. I grew up fishing here as a kid, off and on. My dad and brother and I used to travel up here a lot and fish and float. The clarity of the water and the quality of the water was always one of the things that kept us coming back. The Buffalo River has one of the largest, most diverse populations of fish. There's some largemouth bass in here. There's lots of long-eared sunfish, lots of green sunfish, a few catfish in here. There's a few Ozark bass. There are trout that run up out of the White River. Smallmouth bass are definitely the heart and soul of the Ozarks. They're indicative of a healthy ecosystem. It takes a really clean watershed and river to grow nice smallmouth. A lot of other fish can tolerate a wide variety of conditions and water temperatures, but smallmouth, they're not a warm water fish, they're not a cold water fish, they're a cool water fish. So water in that 55 to 75-degree range is kind of their ideal zone, and it has to be pretty clean, not a lot of turbidity, obviously not much pollution. Smallmouth are a wild fish. None of them are stocked here in Arkansas. They're extremely hard fighter, pound for pound. They're great light tackle fish. I think one of the things that makes the allure of catching them, at least here in the Ozarks, is that it's difficult to catch a big one, or a relatively big one anyway. So when somebody does catch a nice one, it's pretty exciting because it just doesn't happen that often. It's pretty rare. They have a really slow growth rate, probably one of the slowest in the whole country. I think the statewide average is something like 6 years to grow a 12-inch fish.